Is anyone else confused by the whole Taylor Swift, Jake Gyllenhaal scarf situation? I mean, let's be honest here, ladies. I've got at least 6 of my ex-boyfriend's hoodies, and I don't see him writing any songs about me. Just kidding, because like Elsa, we know how to let it go. Hey there guys, my name's Megan if you're new here, and if not, welcome back for another spooky episode of Killer Weekend, where each week we'll discuss a true crime case, and you guys can feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments box below. There's a lot of shoulder pad action happening in this week's episode. If you like all things true crime, supernatural, UFO, conspiracy theory, and all that good stuff in between, then please hit that subscribe button. I'll be here for you every weekend with our True Crime Killer Weekends, and on and off every couple of Wednesdays with our Weirdo Wednesdays, where I'll discuss something spooky I've heard. So my little angel muffins, how's life? How's you? Everyone just pretending that the world isn't a shambles right now? Me too! If I've learned one thing on social media this week, it's that there's 2 types of women in the world. The type of women who are excited for Sarah Jessica Parker's return as Carrie Bradshaw on Sex and the City, and then the other girls who are excited about Sarah Jessica Parker's return as the witch in Hocus Pocus. I'll let you guess which one I am. I just want to say a massive thank you to each and every single one of you who reached out after last week's episode. I was having a bit of a Debbie Downer week, but you guys brought me back up and made me feel amazing. So thank you so much. I love you. So, without any more insane ramblings from me, let's get into the meat and potatoes of this week's episode. So many of you guys are amazing with your case recommendations. Honestly, I can't thank you enough. I get them in my inboxes, I get them in my DMs, I get them in the comments, and it is quite hard to pick one out of them all. There are some cases, and of course victims, that reach out and grab you, and once they have you, they won't let go. And that's exactly what happened when I found this week's case. As I wanted to learn more about this case, I dug in deeper and I really struggled, guys. Here we had this amazing, beautiful little girl and no information. No one out there apparently trying to fight for her. I'm hoping that the more we share her story, we can maybe finally get those answers to this heartbreaking mystery. Tonight, everyone, we will be discussing the mysterious disappearance of Toyah Hill. The day of March 24th, 1982 actually was one of significance for Toyah Hill's family. Her mother, Annette Stanley, was due to be married in a few days, and that evening she was having her bridal gown fitting. Joining Annette at the altar would be her 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls, including her middle daughter named Toya. Toya was so excited at the idea of being a flower girl for her mum. She just thought she would have a little bouquet, wear a pretty party dress, stuff herself with cake and have a good time. Toya was born on the 24th of August 1973, and if you see a picture of this little girl, I promise you the first thing you're going to notice is these gorgeous big brown eyes full of innocence, and if it's even possible, they're made even cuter by the massive glasses that she wears with them. Always the good girl who respected her mother, Toya was a 3rd grade student at the City Springs Elementary School in Baltimore. Good morning, Baltimore. Every day is an open door. Sorry, I had to do that. I love Hairspray. But yes, Toya was a dedicated little girl, and she often won awards for her perfect attendance and her good grades at school. Forever the obedient child, this is what would make her behaviour on the 24th of March 1982 so bizarre. Toya arrived home after school to her mother's apartment in the Lafayette Homes, which was also a public housing project. The family had been living on Spring Street in Baltimore in Maryland. Is it Maryland or Maryland or Maryland? I don't quite know because I'm not American and I feel like it gets a little bit lost in translation with the Scottish accent. Also, a side note that totally just came to me because I'm eating cookies. Is this where Maryland cookies come from? Or am I just being an idiot? Moving on, as Toya's mother got ready for her bridal fitting, Toya came in and asked if she could go out to play. Her mother Annette said that yes, she could go out to play, but she had to have something to eat beforehand. So Annette fixed her something to eat and off Toya went. Now, before I dive into the next part, and this one's for you, all my angry little birds and keyboard warriors out there, please try and remember that this was a different time, and I'm sure Annette feels guilty every single day for what was to happen next. Annette made the fateful decision to leave her 4 children in the apartment alone so that she could go to her bridal fitting at around 6:15 p.m. I will say that around the age of 13, which was the age of Annette's oldest child, me and my sister used to walk home from school and have to wait in the house for my mum and dad finishing work, okay? Old school parents were just a different breed. Love you, mum and dad. So, in the grand scheme of things, Annette leaving the children in to fend for themselves that night wasn't really odd. What was odd was what happened next. You see, as we had mentioned, Toya was always the dutiful daughter and had never disobeyed her mother, like never. And that night, she chose to say to her older sister that she was going to the local grocery store to buy sweets. Now, her sister at this point was like, absolutely not, you know that's against mum's rules. And Toya said that she did not care and that she was going anyway. When I heard this, it did make me think, why that night did Toya feel so compelled to go to the grocery store? Was she meeting someone there? 8-year-old Toya then put on her blue outdoor jacket and headed off in the direction of the grocery store to walk the 2-block distance. Unfortunately, Toya's family would never see her again. At around 7:30 p.m. that night, Annette arrived back to the apartment from her bridal fitting. And what should have been an extremely happy occasion, I mean literally the family were only days away from the wedding, suddenly took a turn. And the minute that young mother stepped through the door, she was plunged into a nightmare. Upon being informed that Toya had left for sweets and had never returned, Annette contacted law enforcement, but because of the area they were living in, which was quite a high crime area, and also more likely because of the colour of their skin, Toya's family believed that her case was not followed up seriously. Because of the lack of law enforcement activity at the time, Toya's family and friends decided to go out in force and search for her on foot. Several neighbours from the area remembered seeing Toya walking to the grocery store and exactly what she was wearing. She was wearing a blue jacket, a pair of blue jeans, and an orange and blue striped top. Members of the community remembered seeing Toya walking purposefully towards the grocery store, but only feet away from the front door, her journey was interrupted by none other than Annette's ex-boyfriend and his best friend. The events over the next few days would have the public and law enforcement questioning Toya's own family. Was Annette this innocent grieving mother, or could she have possibly been involved in her daughter's disappearance? To outsiders, Annette's behaviour would suggest the latter, as only 3 days after her daughter was reported missing, she went ahead with her wedding to fiancé John Poindexter. Now, before we sharpen those pitchforks, I do understand that Annette's marriage would definitely raise some eyebrows, and we're talking about the 80s, so those are some big ass eyebrows. But she did have her reasons. After hearing from neighbours that Toya was last seen with her ex-partner, Annette had her own theory. You see, the relationship between Annette and her ex was extremely turbulent, and sometimes it could get quite aggressive and violent. Annette's ex, whose identity still to this day remains undisclosed, didn't really take the breakup too well, and he would often harass Annette in order to get her to break up with her new partner. Because of all this, the young mother felt like this could actually all be a ploy in order to get Annette to cancel her wedding to John. So she felt like if she went ahead with the wedding and her ex was holding Toya to prevent that from happening, eventually he would just let her go, as his plan hadn't worked. But that didn't happen. This wedding day was far from joyous, and Annette's husband would later go on to say that Annette spent most of her time sitting in her wedding gown, crying in a corner, being consoled by her family and friends. When the new bride awoke the next morning to no further information on her daughter's whereabouts, she started to realise that perhaps the reason behind her daughter's abduction was far more sinister than she had originally thought. For years, Annette demanded answers regarding where her little girl had gone, and nothing. Radio silence. People weren't talking, and whether that was through fear, we just don't know. The stress of Toya's disappearance definitely took a toll on her family, and the marriage between Annette and John Poindexter would end rather abruptly. Now, shortly after her decision to end her marriage, Annette would make another choice that would yet again baffle friends and family. Annette Stanley would announce that she was engaged to be married to her ex-boyfriend. Yes! The same ex-boyfriend that she blamed for all those years of abducting her daughter. Now, as strange as this is for you, and definitely for me, Annette had a plan. She was hoping that if she gave in to her ex's demands and gave him what he wanted, which was essentially her, that she could coerce a confession out of him. Is it possible that over the years the guilt had become too much and he would finally confess? Not likely, as after only a few months, she was getting no further, and Annette had to end the marriage because she simply couldn't live in a home with a man that she didn't trust with her children and that she actually hated. The marriage was over, and Annette was no closer to finding out what happened to her child. Annette's ex-boyfriend, now ex-husband, was interviewed at the time along with his friend who was outside the grocery store with him, but the two men were said to have solid alibis. Now, still to this day, we do not know what those alibis were or how solid they really were either. Something else that was never disclosed was whether Toya had actually made it into the grocery store at all, and if she was in there, was she accompanied by someone else? It would appear that this case has a lot of holes in it, and also there's not been a lot of media coverage on this case at all, and a lot of people in Baltimore are asking why. Only 2 years after Toyah Hill went missing, another young girl called Janelle Matthews also went missing from her family home around Christmas time. Now, if you don't know anything about the Janelle Matthews case, you literally just have to type her name into Google and millions of hits come up. So it does beg the question, why are some of our black young girls' cases not receiving the same amount of media coverage? Sadly, Toya's isn't the only case like this. In fact, between the years that she went missing and 1995, 2 other girls would go missing and 2 Jane Does would be found. Because of the closeness in time frame and also the fact that all of these cases took place in Maryland, we do have to ask ourselves, could their cases be connected? The 1984 case of Tiffany Goins is eerily similar to that of Toyah Hill. She went missing on the 5th of December 1984, and much like Toya, she started off her day by going to the grocery store. Tiffany Goins lived in Frederick in Maryland, and she had a brother and a sister. She was also a middle child. At the age of 12, Tiffany was said to be an extremely helpful little girl and would often run errands for the elderly members of the community around her. She would go to the grocery store and pick up bits and bobs for those who couldn't get out themselves, especially during the winter. So when Tiffany asked if she could go out to see a friend that evening, it wasn't anything strange, and her mother told her to be back home around 5. Unfortunately, Tiffany would never return home, and she was never seen again. Now, in the words of the late and respected Cilla Black, surprise, surprise, because the police work in this one was again very shitty. Betty tried to report her daughter missing to the local law enforcement. They said that she would have to wait 24 hours before they would even go out and look for her daughter. Also, just as awful, Tiffany's mother would provide law enforcement with an up-to-date photo of her daughter with the braids that she currently had, but they chose to use an old photo, which probably led a lot of people to misidentifying the missing girl. Several members of the neighbourhood said they were sure they saw someone who matched the description of Tiffany on the missing poster getting into a red or dark blue car. There's not really much to go on off of this, and we're still to this day not actually sure if it was even Tiffany they saw. There's some eerie coincidences that circulate around all three of the cases that we're mentioning in this week's episode, and this would lead us to ask the question, are these just coincidences, or is this possibly the trademark of a killer? Both Toya and Tiffany were abducted near home. They were also both wearing a blue jacket and a pair of blue jeans. The case we will discuss in a minute of Melody McCoy could also be connected to this because she, much like Tiffany, went missing around Christmas time. Is it possible that someone was grooming these girls and letting them meet them with the promise of a Christmas gift? Sadly, like the case of Toyah Hill, Tiffany Goins was never found. In fact, her mother Betty would spend 35 years sleeping on the sofa just in the hope that her daughter would one day walk through the living room door. The next case we have actually took place in Baltimore, where Toya was from as well. A young girl named Melody McCoy went missing on December 1st, 1991. Her case is a little bit different, but we still have the same sketchy police work and low media attention, so that's just wonderful. On November 30th, 1991, Melody McCoy left her home to go to a friend's apartment for a sleepover. Now, the flats that they lived in were in a notoriously dodgy part of Baltimore, quite a high crime rate. The name of the family that Melody was staying with still has not been released to this day. But when Melody arrived there, she didn't stay for long because the next morning, when the mother of the children that she was having the sleepover with came in to check on her, she was gone. Now you would think to yourself, she's noticed that Melody's gone. Also, Melody's bike is still outside with a punctured wheel. Not only that, Melody's jacket is still in their apartment, but one of her son's jackets is missing. Maybe I should call the police, or even at best, Melody's mother. But no, the woman just assumed that Melody had walked home with her son's jacket and never thought to call anyone. But this case just gets stranger and stranger because when Melody didn't arrive home before school on Tuesday, her mother never thought anything strange of that. In fact, Melody's mother would only report her daughter missing when she didn't arrive for school on the Tuesday, which was 3 days after she was last seen. Law enforcement too felt like this was extremely sketchy, so they asked the young mother why she hadn't reported her daughter missing. She would then say that Melody would sometimes stay with an aunt nearby and she just assumed that she had left her friend's house to go to her aunt's house and stayed the weekend. A very vague response, but with nothing else to go on, her case slowly went cold. Local police wouldn't really push the case any further. I mean, this young girl's mother isn't even making waves, so why should they? And her case fell into obscurity. Like the other two cases, it rarely featured on the news, and still to this day, it's quite rare to hear the name Melody McCoy. For a long time there, it seemed like women of colour and children of colour were being ignored in the media, especially when they went missing. It was always just explained away as a teen or child runaway. But these girls clearly did not run away. They've been missing, some of them, for upwards of 40 years. It's actually really tragic that we lived in a time where not white equaled not solved. Toya and the missing girls of Maryland were precious and they were just starting out their lives. So I ask every single one of you watching, especially over the festive period, as you spend time with your loved ones, please do try and spare a thought for Toya's mother Annette, flipping through her photo albums, waiting for that one day her baby might come home. I hope you guys enjoyed this week's episode, and I really hope that you will share Toya's story and the story of the other girls mentioned in this week's episode. If you did enjoy it, please give it a big thumbs up for me. It really helps my channel, and yeah, it just lets me know that I'm not a stinky bogey. If you're watching Megan True Crime for the first time and you're thinking, oh, she rhymes. Get it? Time, crime, rhyme. It's been a long day. Please hit that subscribe button. I'll be here for you every weekend. If you want to follow me, but not home or to the grocery store, because apparently that's what someone else was doing, then feel free to follow me on Instagram at Megan True Crime. I have a little TikTok page over on TikTok at Megan.truecrime. I love each and every one of you little beautiful people watching. Rah. So please remember to lock your doors, don't talk to strangers, and also don't wear tweed because it's very, very itchy. Fashionable but uncomfortable. See ya! Cheers! Milk and cookies. Milk and cookies. You got it. You want it. Baby, you got it. Sarah Jessica. Sarah fucking Jessica. Hey there. Oh.